nervous system understanding, a brain understanding too, but a nervous system understanding that people are dangerous, or people are unpredictable, or people can't be trusted, right? And when the nervous system learns that, and the nervous system is very wise and learns that easily.
Hello, Deb. Can you hear me?
Hello, how are you?
Hi, Deb. This is Ming Canada.
Nice to meet you, Ming. Thanks for we're being flexible around this.
Of course, of course. Thank you for coming on. You're a big deal with your important work.
Thank you.
If you're ready,
where are you in the world? Is that your background, or is it a virtual background?
this is a virtual background. I am in Gainesville, Florida.
Got it. Is it hot there today?
It is actually a very overcast and gray day.
Here too. I'm outside Chicago. It's overcast and gray as well.
Yeah. But it's going to be warm though. It's going to be 80 degrees almost today.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Enjoy that. Yeah.
If you're ready, I was going to read your bio, read a brief bio, and then
make it brief. Yes. Good.
And then we'll continue we'll start the interview.
Let's do. Good.
Okay. Awesome. So Deb Dana, LCSW, is a clinician, consultant, and author specializing in trauma treatment through Polyvagal Theory. She pioneered the rhythm of regulation to help individuals heal from trauma and embrace life fully. A founding member of the Polyvagal Institute, she developed training programs making complex neuroscience accessible to professionals and the public. Trained in multiple therapeutic modalities, Deb integrates neuroscience into everyday experiences, offering workshops worldwide. Her work empowers people to understand their nervous system, fostering safety, resilience, and deep connections in relationships and mental health. Welcome, Deb. Was there anything from that bio that you want to correct or add to?
No, it was lovely. I will say, Ming, that it always feels weird to have your bio read, and then you go to, as you're reading it, it felt, oh, I like that. Oh, I did do that. So it's an interesting experience just to start off that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll kick off with our first question with sharing some moments or experience that first inspired you to explore polyvagal theory and its practical applications.
Well, it's interesting. I've always been a neuroscience nerd, so in my work with clients, I always wanted them to understand how the brain worked, and spent a lot of time studying the brain. And then I read Steve Porges's first book, and it was as if a missing piece of the puzzle had appeared for me. And I thought, oh, it's not just here, it's nervous system feeding information to the brain. And from that point on, I was hooked. It was like, oh my gosh, I have to learn more and more about polyvagal theory. So I invited Steve to come give a presentation to my group. He came to Maine, and we got to know each other, and it's just been a joy ever since to work with him, collaborate with him, and find ways to bring his theory into easy application, so that not only clinicians, but what I like to call the curious humans in the world can understand how their nervous system works.
Yeah, thank you. So how has working with polyvagal theory changed your personal understanding of emotions and relationships? I know for me, I'll share a personal tidbit. I was adopted, so at around 4, 5, 6, I was abandoned and lived in an orphanage for almost 7 years. And so relationships and trust has always been difficult and triggering, especially, for everyone to a degree when it becomes really close, intimate relationships. And so really, if you could answer this question, I'll ask it again in light of how to work with relationships and learn to trust, even though people have gone through traumatic events. Some may be similar to mine and others not so much. So how has working with polyvagal theory changed your personal understanding of emotions and relationships?
Yeah. It's an interesting experience, isn't it, to grow up with a nervous system understanding, a brain understanding too, but a nervous system understanding that people are dangerous, or people are unpredictable, or people can't be trusted, right? And when the nervous system learns that, and the nervous system is very wise and learns that easily, it then forms a survival pattern inside our system that activates to keep us safe, because the nervous system is always working in service of our survival, even though I may long to be close to this person, and yet my nervous system says, don't reach out, it's not safe, you'll be hurt. Or if you reach out, what I found with many of my clients was that belief, if you reach out, no one will be there. Right. So either one of those are devastating to our human being. Right. So, as I learned, because again, it's that in my early training, it was that sort of top down, how can we, think about this differently? And it wasn't until I discovered, you have to feel about it differently in order to think about it differently, that I kind of had a new map as to how to help people begin to dip into feeling safe enough to come into connection. And in the beginning, we come into connection for tiny moments, right? Because the nervous system allows us to feel just a moment, and then we take a step back. So forward and back. That's the normal human experience of testing out, is this safe or not safe? Right. And when you understand that through a nervous system perspective, you can get out of the stories that we love to make. We love to make up stories about motivation, right? Or even moral meaning, right? We humans do that all the time. And in clinical work, if someone's not engaging, our brain makes up the story, they're not trying hard enough, or they don't really want this. They don't want to change. They could if they wanted to. Those are all the brain stories we make up. If we go to the nervous system is very simply and clearly saying, it's not safe enough in this moment to engage. Right. And once I discovered that, I then went to, it's never my client's job to make it safe enough. That's my job as a clinician. It's also my job as a parent or a partner or a colleague, right? It's my job to say, what does your nervous system need in order to feel safe enough to engage? Right? That's the question that I want to ask. And, in my own, life experience, I have had moments of feeling betrayed, abandoned, right? And my brain makes up a story, but it's my nervous system that I need to go to, right? So my nervous system, when I feel unsafe, takes me pretty quickly to disconnect, collapse, right? To that dorsal place of why bother? It's hopeless. Don't reach out, right? Other people's nervous systems will take them to the sympathetic, anxiety, desperation, or the anger, the fight, right? Those are our choices in our nervous system. And we each, we move through both, but we have one that becomes our preferred place of protection over the course of our lifetime. So, mine's the dorsal despair. Where's yours? What's your preferred survival place? Do you go to reach out desperately for connection, or do you go to be angry, or do you go to why bother? There's no hope. Where do you go?
I'm somewhat in between. I'm good at connecting and reaching out, but then I withdraw when I feel scared. And
right.
And I really control whether it's timing or physical distance. I really control that.
So you're in that place of I need to manage it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's more of what we would call the sympathetic energy around manage this to keep it safe enough, right? My system goes to the no energy, just give up place, right? And again, we could make up meaning around that, but there's no need. The nervous system is simply taking you to the place it feels you'll be the safest, right? And once we begin to look at it that way, we can be curious, right? I could be curious. It can even be curious for me about, I just disconnected. And when I find enough ability to take a step back, I can say, what is it that's making me feel so unsafe that my system just disconnected, right? Yeah, that's the joy of looking at it through your biology rather than through your cognition.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, just to add a little bit more, I do the distance because the emotions are so big in here. The fear, the insecurity is so big. And I need quite a bit of time to have it recalibrate.
See, isn't that a beautiful way your nervous system helps you do that? You know, your nervous system says there's way too much going on inside here. It's too big. It's overwhelming. We're going to just, shut down or move back and give time to be able to come back again. Right. Yeah. It's a brilliantly created nervous system, isn't it? That does this for us without us having to decide to do it. It simply does it on our behalf.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe the next question will really build on the rebuilding of the safety.
Yeah.
So, how do you define safety, not just as a biological state, but as a philosophical or existential experience?
Yeah, I mean, that's a both and when we work, with our humanness, we're often working with both our body and our brain. They go together, right? And so the lovely thing about understanding the nervous system is that our pathways of protection that we've been talking about can be reshaped into pathways of connection, right? We're not stuck in a survival strategy forever, right? We will dip in and out of it, but we can also shape our system towards feeling safe and connection. And safety is both this biological state, right? When whatever's coming in, I get cues through, what is known as neuroception, which is the nervous system's way of taking in information. So it begins to feel safe in my body. My environment has cues of safety. It feels safe in the space between me and another person, right? Those are cues of safety. We also have cues of danger happening all the time. Maybe I have a ache or a pain or a digestive issue or something going on inside. Maybe there's something in my environment that feels scary. And maybe the way you're looking or talking or moving feels scary to me, right? So those things, that's another both and safe and danger is always happening at the same time. When we can come to feeling enough safety biologically, then we can think about the cognition and the larger experience of safety and what it means, right? But if we're in a survival state, it's hard to think about the larger philosophical sense of safety because I'm not in it, right? So it's really interesting. How can I touch into safety so that I can then, create stories about it and begin to develop more of that potential in my world? They go together. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you answered my question in a very relatable way where the average person could understand it because I find myself often when I do these interviews going to intellectualizing and sounding way more than it is.
Right. Right. No, let's keep it very, very easy to access because really what we're saying is the nervous system is what makes us human. And so understanding how our system works is so important, right? And your system works differently than mine. Every system works a bit differently, but it uses these same, ways of being. So what's a cue of safety for you might be a cue of safety for me or might be a cue of danger. Right. And that's the interesting part that a way a person moves might feel really welcoming to me and unwelcoming to you. Right. A way a person, a word a person uses may be really safe to you and feel unsafe to me. And that's the joy of getting to know your nervous system is you get to know what feels safe to me, what feels dangerous to me. Right. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about that because oftentimes I feel like myself included, I've gotten better over the last year or two since starting therapy. How can people start recognizing when they're dysregulated and the steps that they can take to return to to
Yeah.
balance.
Yeah. So you're right. The first step is to notice, where am I? Am I dysregulated or not? Right. And sympathetic, which is that fight, flight, lot of energy, chaotic, disorganized energy flooding me. That's usually pretty easy to recognize because we can't sit still. We're looking around. We can't focus. We've just got all this going on. It feels like, oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. Right. That's usually fairly easy to recognize because we feel it in that way, and we can recognize it in somebody else because we see it, right? I can see that, oh, she's really mad. That's a sympathetic, oof. Or oh, she's really worried, anxious. You can see it, right? So then okay, I'm now in fight, flight, survival, right? The dorsal, which is that disconnect, collapse, shutdown, is sometimes harder to recognize, right? Because when I'm looking at somebody else, it's hard. I might make the judgment that, oh, they're bored, or they don't care, or they don't want to be here, or they're not trying. Because what I'm noticing is you're not connecting. You kind of don't have any interest. You don't have any energy. My brain might make up a story about that, but if I'm curious about the nervous system, it may be that your system just doesn't have the energy needed. It's sort of that they're going through the motions, but they don't really care. They're not really here doing it, right? That's that other survival response. And we have to get to know, how does that come alive for us, right? Like, do you know when you're in sympathetic fight, flight? Can you feel that energy? Do you know that in yourself?
I do feel big emotions. Yes.
Yeah.
For me, I don't know how it is for everyone else, but I always feel big emotions.
Yeah. Yeah.
In me, and then.
So you feel those big emotions. Oh, I'm in a survival state now because they're overwhelming me. They're too big, right? We can feel big emotions, but they get too big, and then it's like, no, right? And then how do you feel the disconnect? How do you feel the shutdown, all those big emotions sort of drain away? How do you feel that?
When they drain away, a lot of times I'll leave the physical space. I'll leave. I've learned in the last couple of years to leave a space before what I've done previously, and what I still often do with much closer relationships where I don't feel as threatened. Like, say, my parents, they'll see a lot more of my anger and my combative side, whereas other people who I don't feel nearly as safe with, and see the full sides of me, I run away. I leave.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you run away and leave, what do you do then? Do you sort of just, what do you do?
It's changed. Now I either journal or sometimes I meditate. Those are my healthier coping mechanisms.
Yeah. Nice.
Then a lot of times in the past, I just cry until they subside.
So when things get too big for me and I do that run away, so to speak, my collapse looks like, so maybe I'm just sitting, staring off into space. I have no energy. I have a to-do list, but I don't even look at it. It's that sort of, can't really get anything done. Don't really care about it. Right. So, and I know when I've gone to that place, I'm in this, this collapse state. So it's either the active fight, flight, or the collapse, right? And the first thing we have to do is to get to know for ourselves, how do I know where I am, right? Because then what we do next depends on where I am. If I'm in that fight and flight state and I want to come back to some balance, I've got lots of energy in my system, but it's too much, it's disorganized, it's chaotic, and it's flooding me. So I want to organize that energy in some way, which might mean for me, walking outside and going for a walk. Might mean turning on some music and singing along in a big loud voice to the music, right? It's some sort of an active interaction that gets me to use the energy I have in a more productive way. And then I feel a little more balance, right? The last thing we want to do is try to stifle that energy, because it will just come up and get bigger at some point, right? So we want to use that energy in some way that makes sense, right? With kids, you often see, they can, there's some sort of rhythmic movement that wants to begin to happen, toss a ball back and forth, or, go out and skip or jump or run something, right? So that's in sympathetic. In that fight flight place, I got all this energy, I have to organize it in some way. But in that collapse place, I don't have energy. So I can't do the same things in order to find my way back to balance. I have to invite some energy to come back in, right? So how do I bring some energy back in slowly and gently, right? And for me, it's often, music is a go-to for me. So I often will just turn on some music. It's very different music than the fight music. It's this lovely sort of, inviting, gentle music that helps me feel a rhythm coming back into my body. And as that rhythm begins to come back, I begin to move very slowly, right? Sometimes I'll just look out the window and see, oh, there's a bigger world out there. So again, when we know where we are, so the first step is to figure out, how do I know where I am? And then the second step is to create a menu of things you might do to help yourself channel that energy differently. And I loved what you said. You might journal, some people, I listen to music, some people do some sort of art. Some people just have a movement practice or a breath practice. So these are all the ways that we can begin to bring ourselves back to some balance through our bodies.
Yeah, thank you. I think you answered a lot of my questions already about incorporating it into people's lives. They could do these in the morning or evening, or some steps.
The nice thing to do is when you find something that feels nourishing to you, nourishes your nervous system, and your brain says this feels good. When you find those things, then figure out, how do I bring them into my daily world, right? How do I not just reach for them when I need because I'm feeling dysregulated, I'm feeling out of balance, but how do I use them when I'm okay to deepen my sense of feeling balanced? So that's what we want to begin to do. I often have music on because I love music, and it just feels very, nourishing to me. Sometimes I sing along, sometimes I move along, right? So for me, I found something that I like to just incorporate into my everyday world, right? So if we can do that,
go
you
ahead.
what? No, go ahead.
Is this related to your concept of glimmers? Is that different?
Yeah, no, glimmers are a bit different, but if we can talk about glimmers for a moment, because really what we're saying is the key to living a life of well-being is not to always be in balance. That's impossible for any human. But again, what we've just done, to know when I'm out of balance and to have ways to come back into balance. That's the key to living a life of well-being, right? We suffer when we get out of balance and get stuck there and can't find our way back. So we want to resource that state in our nervous system that is the state of regulation, connection, and balance. It's called ventral for people who want to know that, but it's when your nervous system is in a state of healthy homeostasis. We want to do everything we can to have tiny moments of that. And glimmers are the concept that I created to help people find the tiny moments, right? In my work with complex trauma survivors, sense of balance and staying in balance was too much for them to to be able to do. So instead, we looked for tiny moments that felt reachable, that we could notice, and we could bring them in. And the word I used for that was glimmers, right? And so finding glimmers means finding tiny moments that bring you a sense of balance, or a sense of joy, or a smile, or ease, or happiness, or peace, any flavor of balance that you see in the moment, right? And a glimmer, again, we want to make sure people understand, a glimmer is not so that you're turning away from the challenges in your life. Finding glimmers increases your ability to then work with the challenges in your life, right? Because the more our nervous system can be in a place of regulation, can bring that energy, we can then turn toward our suffering and work with it, right? So glimmers, are the tiny moments that we want to notice as we move through our day. Like, I'm just trying to think of a glimmer this morning was, outside my kitchen window. I sit at the kitchen counter working, and outside the window, there's a wind chime, and the wind chime was going off. It was like, oh, I love that. Right. It was that, that's nice. I could feel it. Right. So that was a glimmer moment for me. Right. And they're just tiny moments that we can see, we can stop with them and appreciate them. Every time we do that, it increases our capacity to be regulated. Right. So have you had a glimmer today so far?
Yeah, that's a good way of gaining control of our environment.
Yeah.
For me, a glimmer, um, I went up to the rooftop and got some air, some fresh air.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was nice.
Beautiful.
So if our nervous system is shaped by our environment and experiences, how do you think we can reclaim agency, power in a world that often feels out of control? I think a lot of us can relate to this.
Yeah, I think it feels at the moment like we're living in a very dysregulated world, right? With what's going on in the world right now. And then I think for many people, their personal worlds have felt dysregulated, chaotic, unsafe for a long time. Right. So we have both the personal experience of unsafety and the more collective experience of unsafety. So how do we regain some, I like to say we can begin to become active operators of our nervous system. How do we do that? Right. And it starts from our own personal experience, right? That if I can find my way to regulation a bit more quickly, if I dysregulate a little less intensely or not as long, right? If my moments of regulation are more frequent, then I have more management over my system, right? So I'm looking for the tiny changes. We're not looking for a great big shift because that's not how your nervous system recalibrates. It recalibrates when small things happen over and over. And again, if you are really suffering, in my work with trauma survivors who were stuck in this traumatic experience, finding tiny moments and knowing that is the pathway to safety was really helpful, right? So we're looking for the pathway to safety for ourselves, because then when we become regulated, we're then offering that out to the world. Right. I often, people ask me how to change the world, and, this system, whatever this system is, needs to be changed. I have no idea how to change this system. Right. But I can change this system. And as I change this system, I then influence all the other people around me. So for me, it's more of a working here and then it spreads out there. That I can manage. That's about all I can manage in the world we're living in nowadays, right? Is I can be responsible for my own regulation, and then I can offer that sense of safety to the people around me.
So it starts with us, as they always say, and then everything we interact with will just be that much better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are some ways we can change our personal environments. Like we can find the things that bring us joy and bring them into our environment, whether that's having, lots of things around or having a few things around. And again, our nervous system will help us figure that out. Is there a color that you like? Is there a smell that you like? Is there a shape that you like that your nervous system says, oh, that feels welcoming? So we can create some personal environments that help us feel in that place of balance, right? So there are something, again, sounds, smells, space, all of that we can create for ourselves, right? And then, green space, nature, water, all of those things have been shown to impact our nervous system. So, I'm a water person. I love being around the water. right? I have other friends who love the mountains, or I have friends who love the desert, right? It's like, I don't quite understand that because I need the water, but okay. Where, if you find where your system says this feels nourishing to me, then you can either go to that place or you can have pictures of that place. You can have sounds of that place. Lots of ways to return to that place and help your nervous system feel cared for.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. I like water as well. So to help. So we talked about creating safety and creating glimmers. What do you think about our desire to create that safety becoming possibly a barrier? So when and how do you encourage people to embrace discomfort when it's needed?
Yeah, so it's a great question because we don't want people to keep turning away from discomfort because there are lessons in discomfort, right? We say that the nervous system is always trying to communicate with you through symptoms, right? So symptoms are trying to tell you something. The challenge is I can't listen to the discomfort if I've gone into fight, flight, or collapse shutdown because my system is now simply focused on survival and my cognition, my cortex is gone into hypoactive mode. It's no longer there to help me listen and problem solve. So we're always working with the right degree of challenge for our system so that I can be informed by the suffering. I can be with the suffering and not be reliving it. Right. So that's the line we're always walking. Right. So we want to stretch our capacity to be with discomfort. But as soon as we move over into survival, we are the discomfort rather than being with the discomfort. So that's what we're learning to do. And the more we resource with glimmers, with ability to notice, oh, there's a moment of okayness, that then helps me be with the discomfort. Oh, there's a moment of discomfort, and learn from what's causing the discomfort. What do I need to do? Maybe there's nothing I can do. How can I create a relationship with this discomfort that's different? Right. One of the things we in therapy, we say all the time, I can't change what happened to you. I can't change what is happening, but I can change your relationship with it. Right? That's the goal of therapy, is to help you have a different relationship with what's happening.
So we inherited something, but it's not necessarily our fault or
Absolutely. Yeah.
anything of our doing that we inherited, but is something we have to address and take care of.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you talk about, living in a body that's changed in some way. Right. Perhaps you came into the world with a body that didn't work the same way as every other, or maybe that's happened along the way. Right. And you have to figure out, how do I inhabit this body in a different way? Right. I mean, that's what happens when we have a chronic illness or an accident or an injury. The body we inhabit changes, and the body that is what brings us safety, or now might bring us a sense of unsafety, unsureness, unpredictability. And those are hard for our brain body system. So how do we learn how to live with a different relationship with our body, with our nervous system, so that our brain can have a different experience?
Thank you so much, Deb. I feel like, your work on trauma is so important, especially for, people like myself, who have quite a bit of trauma, but also a background that's so different from those that are around me.
Yeah.
Being abandoned as a toddler and living in an orphanage and living in a society really at that time that really shunned people with disabilities and thought little value of it. Yeah. And I know it's the case for a lot of individuals with disabilities. Still today, having them quite a bit of disability advocacy work over the last few years. And for me, I was fortunate to be adopted to the US, where there's been a lot of progress, although a lot of work still need to be made, but it's exponentially better than what we see in a lot of countries.
Yeah.
Despite the progress that still needs to happen.
Yeah.
I guess my last question for you is, our formative, and we only have 3 minutes, less than 3 minutes, our formative years really create and shape our nervous system.
Mhm.
For people who really work on, the things that you talk about, is there a way to reshape it, remap it, where we really dramatically react to things differently than the
Yes.
default mode?
Yes, and that's the love, that's the hopefulness of understanding your nervous system, that yes, your system was shaped by your early experience, but is being ongoingly shaped by your current experience. So if your current experience, if you can bring in more safety, more connection, then your system is going to create pathways that take you toward balance and connection. Those protective pathways will still be there, but you won't be pulled into them so quickly and so easily, right? And that's the beauty of our human experience, is that we are changing micro moment to micro moment, right? So our systems today have had my system anyway has had a lovely time in connection with you, and I'm taking that with me as we leave. My system feels warm and as though we've had a lovely connection. That stays with me. It won't end in another minute when we end. It goes with me, right? That's the beauty of this.
Thank you. You have a really nice way of, this is the most personal conversation. I've interviewed over 100 people. This is the most personal I've gotten in an interview. At times, it almost feels like you're interviewing me.
Thank you. Lovely to get to know each other's nervous systems.
Yeah, it is. And I hope, and I know actually some of our listeners will really derive value and calm and from practicing your work. And there's still 3 of your books that I still need to listen to. I listened to 3, and then there's 3 more on Audible that I'm looking forward to listening to. So thank you so much for your wonderful work. It's really helping me out personally, and you already know it's helped so many others.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Lovely to be here with you today.